Is that this bill now be read a second time. I give the call to the member for Deakin.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. I think the fact that the Labor's position on this bill is so indefensible is highlighted by the fact that the member for Perth spoke about every single related topic without actually dealing with any of the substantive aspects of this legislation. So let me bring it back to the Paid Parental Leave Amendment Bill, because for the last 15 minutes we've had a frolic on a number of other topics. The bill that we have here today presents yet another measure from the Coalition to reduce the red tape on business. And I must say the member for Perth, to her credit, mentioned small business once. So you're one up on the member for Hotham. You mentioned it once. But this is a small business measure. And I know members opposite don't know much about small business. Not many of you actually have ever run or had much to do with small businesses. But this bill is about small businesses. Well, your actions don't represent it today, do they? Because we have a situation here where the bill in front of us seeks to replace $44 million of cost burdens on small business with $7 million from the government. And members opposite, in an unconscionable way, are blocking that. This is one series in a series of steps that the government is taking to slash cumbersome and unnecessary regulations. It also reaffirms the government's commitment to support women to have a child and return to work, a commitment underlined by our paid parental leave scheme. The history of the bill before us today also demonstrates the complete and utter lack of understanding of business possessed by those on the opposite side of the House, as I've said. I must say, when I was reading about this bill, I was pretty baffled to read about Labor's years of obstruction to what seems like a very straightforward measure. To the credit of the now Minister for Small Business, the Honourable Bruce Bilson, the genesis of this bill was a private member's motion back in 2011, and it should have been put to bed then. And if we cannot get bipartisan support on something as basic and as straightforward as this, we have problems. It was voted down then and again in 2012, and now in the Senate we see Labor and the Greens locking arms together as usual, seeking to block it, and they want to introduce a confusing and watered-down version of the amendment. I'll come back to this in a moment. But the bill here today, irrespective of the frolic that the member for Perth went on, simply seeks to relieve business of the burden of having to act as the play clerk for the paid parental leave scheme introduced by the former Labor government. As I've said, it's not a radical amendment being proposed. It will save businesses $44 million a year and the not-for-profit sector $4 million a year. And I want to echo the member for Mitchell's comments when he said that those compliance burdens that would be lifted if this legislation is passed is likely to be reinvested by small businesses. And that means upgrades to capital. That means more hours for casual workers. I mean, these are important things, and the Labor Party think, a bit like a camel struggling under the weight of pack, that just put another thing, just another burden, just a bit more, it can take it, and that is what is weighing down small business. That mentality that you can keep loading small businesses, keep loading them with compliance burdens, but in small businesses and family-owned businesses, that's difficult. Having grown up in a small business family myself, every time there's an additional government obligation, an additional form to fill out, an additional requirement, who does it? It's the owners. And they often cannot afford to employ additional people to do that. So what does it mean? It means generally that very late at night they're the ones doing that paperwork. And we want to make sure that small businesses are relieved of an unnecessary burden in this case. I've spoken about the $44 million saving at a national level, but in my home state of Victoria it will save approximately $11.5 million a year. Businesses of all sizes as well as organisations, as I've said, in the not-for-profit sector, will be freed up to focus on what they do best, creating wealth and employment. Businesses have much more important tasks to undertake with their resources, rather than acting as a pay clerk for the paid parental leave scheme. We know this because businesses have been telling us loud and clear for some 5 years, don't believe us, listen to small businesses. Employer groups first raised their concerns and objections to the mandatory employer under the PPL scheme during public consultations back in 2009, before the scheme was even implemented. Unsurprisingly, the former Labor government ignored those representations. We've also heard from employers through the legislated review of the PPL scheme and through businesses contacting us directly about the burden the pay clerk duties place on the operation of their business. So I'd say to members opposite, don't believe us, don't trust us, listen to small businesses. They're crying out for it. Again, just last year, the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry conducted a survey of its members on the PPL scheme. These statistics have been quoted in this debate by some others, but they are overwhelming. So let me quote them again. In the survey, 84.3% of businesses either agreed or strongly agreed that the government should not require employers to be the paymaster for the paid parental leave scheme. The additional costs to employers were outlined in the Paid Parental Leave Evaluation Phase 2 report, with the extra workload the main cause of concern. And it said, among the 29% of employers who felt additional costs were involved, 94% of those, so basically all, said these costs involved them taking on extra work, while 51% said the workload of current staff had been increased by PPL. The median number of staff hours needed to implement the PPL was 22 hours. The median cost was $1,783. Employers have been consistent and strong in their opposition to having to act as pay clerk, and we've listened. When it comes to business, every additional cost, every additional piece of regulation that you have to comply with impacts on your bottom line. For the past 6 years, government in this country has been hindering, not helping business. But this is changing. Today's bill is just one in a suite of measures being introduced to slash red tape in Australia. On the 26th of March, we held the Parliament's first ever Red Tape Repeal Day. More than 10,000 acts and regulations were repealed, removing more than 50,000 pages from the statute books. We're saving more than $700 million in paperwork costs per year, and the benefits to small businesses include repealing the carbon tax, which will not only remove a $9 billion year hit on the economy, but also save over $85 million a year in monitoring, record-keeping and reporting costs. Establishing a dedicated small business hotline at the Fair Work Ombudsman so small businesses can access fast, binding advice on employment terms and conditions. Using standard contract terms for government procurements under $200,000 and credit cards for payments under $20,000, so small businesses can be paid sooner. Amending the personal property securities regime to reduce the burden on hire firms. And of course, the matter for today's debate, moving the pay clerk burden of administering paid parental leave from small businesses themselves to the Family Assistance Office. Again, just to ram the point home to members opposite, saving employers $48 million a year. We took a clear promise to the 2013 election to remove the pay clerk burden, and today we're honouring that promise. That's why we just won't pass Labor's amendment to this bill in the Senate. In March, having twice voted down this amendment, Labor and their partners, the Greens, further demonstrated their lack of appreciation for the business environment by introducing a watered-down amendment. Labor is seeking to remove the paymaster role for businesses with fewer than 20 employees, but of course without any explanation as to how this cut-off would be calculated. And let me also say to members opposite that I have many hundreds of businesses in my electorate which certainly have more than 20 employees, and they are by no way large enterprises. The concept that for a business that hires, say, between 20 and 100 employees is somehow so well resourced that they can act as the pay clerk for PPL is just wrong. That's why we believe this is an unacceptable position. This is now what business wants, and this is what the Australian people want, as they told us last September. So the government wants to see this election commitment fully implemented, and we're asking those opposite not to be mindlessly opportunistic in their opposition, but after years of obstruction, just see reason and support us on this. This isn't controversial. This helps small businesses drastically. Again, our amendment to the payroll system here, unlike their approach, isn't even mandatory. I mean, what more flexibility could we give small businesses in this bill than we are? So we're giving businesses freedom to choose, and we don't pretend to have a better understanding of a business and its resources than the owner. And it's quite astounding that members opposite would seek to presume to have that knowledge or insight, because we know that the Labor Party ignored small businesses for 6 years. They don't care about small business, but we do on this side. So we're asking employers to decide what's best for their business and their workers when it comes to administering the PPL scheme. If an employer has administrative capacity and have found the role to be beneficial to their organisation, they can opt in and continue to act as a pay clerk for the PPL scheme if the employee also agrees. But based on the research and the evidence directly from small businesses that I highlighted earlier, I doubt there'd be many employers opting in to continue in that role. Some pertinent statistics are that between the 1st of July 2011 and 30 June 2013, some 125,000 employees received paid parental leave pay from their employer. Some employers might continue to administer paid parental leave, but it will be their choice. An argument has been put forward that by no longer making it mandatory for employees to administer PPL, somehow employees going on paid parental leave will lose their attachment to the workforce. I mean, I find that an absolutely bizarre argument. I'm not sure what the evidence would be to back that up. So it's really an argument that doesn't pass muster. Further, the administrative costs being placed on businesses, which have clearly been calculated, far outweigh the imagined benefits put forward by Labor of employees feeling more connected. Again, I think the Labor Party are really grasping at straws, and it's just a desperate attempt to justify an approach that they've taken, which is just to be mindlessly opportunistic in opposing the legislation. The Department of Human Resources already administers PPL payments for approximately 24% of employees. It makes sense, therefore, for the department to be responsible for the majority of payments, and we will ensure the resources are available for the department to do so. On this side of the chamber, we want paid parental leave to work for everybody, employers and employees, as well as the government, and that's what we're putting forward here in this legislation. The government, of course, has a more comprehensive plan for paid parental leave in this country, a scheme that will give mothers every opportunity to return to their career. Our genuine, fully funded paid parental leave scheme will help keep mothers engaged with the workforce like never before, and we remain committed to introducing it from 1 July 2015. In the meantime, I would ask members opposite not to obfuscate, deal with the matters at hand in this legislation. It's an indefensible position, I know, and I know it might be tempting to try and talk about everything other than what's in this legislation, but stick to the task at hand. And the bill we have before us today is a sensible move to alleviate the unnecessary red tape from the existing PPL scheme in order to get employers back to business, and I commend it to the House.